Wow, seriously? Wow, we did not expect that. So before we say anything else, hi, very briefly, I'm Efka from No Pun Included. My co-host is
John from John Gets Games.
And wow, you people are amazing. Last time we ended the podcast with saying, hey, we have this email and no one writes any emails to us. And wouldn't it be lovely if someone just wrote us an email? And 7 people wrote us an email, and some of them have questions as well. We're going to read those right at the end of this podcast, and we're just blown away. And it yet again proves that begging does work.
Yeah, I'm not used to begging. It kind of came out of nowhere last time we were recording, but yeah, it was really fun seeing those roll in really quickly. So yeah, thanks for the emails. It's, we see numbers, but it's always nice to see words coming back from people who are listening to this stuff. Once again, today we are here to talk about 3 different games, right, Efka?
As always. And isn't it just much better than when you have words instead of numbers? Numbers suck, don't they?
Especially in the audio format.
Yes, we have 3 different, very exciting games. And what's even more exciting is that this time, neither of us have played the games that the other one is talking about. So not only are you going to be excited listening about these games, but also we are going to be excited.
Yeah. So we've got some pretty cool stuff here. A couple Euro games. One looks like a Euro game, one doesn't. And then something that's quite a bit different. So yeah, let's start off with the fancy looking game. You got a copy of Anachrony, and it's a worker placement game in the future, and that's all I know. So what's going on here?
Oh my god, everything. It is just the most redonkulous game that I have ever played, and I really want to tell you about Anachrony, but the thing that I can't do on a podcast is show you Anachrony, and Anachrony has to be seen. So yes, it is a game about time travel, yay, and worker placement, yay. What I really want from my worker placement games is a game that does something a little bit different with worker placement, you know, like, because worker placement games can feel a little bit stale because they've been around for so long now, and
it's true.
It feels like you've seen everything, and I'm always looking for that little bit of invention. And Anachrony doesn't just give you a little bit of invention. Anachrony just wants to do everything. Have you seen the size of that box?
I've seen the size of the box. I've seen some pretty minis. I've seen lots of saturated colors, but that's kind of all I got. I mean, in a nutshell, what's the mechanical difference? What's the zing for the worker placement in this one versus, you know, the hundreds of other ones?
Right, so you've seen the pretty minis, and the minis are something else. If you haven't seen the minis, dear listeners, please do me a favor and just, you know, go on Board Game Geek and search for Anachrony and just look at them, because they look like something like, I don't know, H.R. Geiger dreamt up in a fever dream, but also have these, like, weird influences from Golden Age sci-fi ideas, you know. So if you think of that robot in Forbidden Planet, whatever his name was, you know, think that, but with more tentacles. It's and they're so big and chunky. And I remember reading somewhere that the publishers wanted to have minis, but they wanted to have minis that served a practical purpose in the game, and it almost kind of does. I mean, there is certainly an excuse for them, because you have these little cardboard workers. And so the clever thing that the game does is that there are 2 types of worker placement actions. So at the start of the game, you will have no buildings built on your player board because you have a personal player board. And you will have many worker action spots that require you to put your little man in an exosuit. But there's only a limited amount of exosuits that you can have. So you can have more actual workers than you have exosuits. But the best actions in the game, and at the start of the game, the only actions that you can do are ones that require exosuits. But once you kind of build up your engine and get things going, you'll have buildings on your player board where you don't have to have exosuits to send workers to. So you have this kind of game going where every round you have to decide how many exosuits you want to power up. Those cost resources. And, you know, how many workers can you actually afford to put into them, and how many will go and do what. And so immediately the game asks you to make a lot of decisions.
So from a thematic perspective, is the air toxic or something like that? And you're starting the game and you have no buildings, you're just you in a suit, see how far you can run?
Yeah, oh god, I didn't even tell you about the theme, which is just the most out there theme in the world. So you are in the future, right? But not only are you in the future, there's also time travel that everyone seemed to have developed, but also it's a future of our Earth where things have gone really, really badly and some cataclysmic event happened. But also, because you can like time travel, you know that another cataclysmic event is going to happen, which is actually there in game terms. As you play the game, there might be another cataclysmic event that might or might not happen depending on the modules that you're playing with, because this game, on top of being like the most complicated game that I have ever played, okay, so I'm not exaggerating, bar none, the most complicated game I have ever played, and that includes Madeira, right? So, but yeah, it also on top of that has like a bazillion different modules that you can strap on. So in the normal game, there's a second cataclysmic event that will happen midway through your game, all right? And you just have to kind of deal with that and plan for that.
One apocalypse wasn't enough, right?
Yeah. One wasn't enough. But you can slap on this module that says, hey, this event might shift in time and might happen earlier or later in the game, or might not happen at all.
What happens? Like, does the second apocalypse cataclysm like start the end game, or does it increase the number of options you have, or what?
Yeah, it does all those things spectacularly.
Okay.
Because so what happens basically is, as you mentioned, yes, the air is toxic and stuff like that. So there's this capital city, right, where like everyone congregates. But there's also like 4 different paths that represent you as players, because on top of everything, this game is asymmetrical, and each faction has like different abilities and stuff like that.
Of course.
And you're trying to have your faction be the most, you know, like hip future faction, just the most hip future faction out of all the factions, because you have a philosophy and you feel like your philosophy is, you know, I was going to swear, it's the bleep, basically. You know, your philosophy is the best philosophy. and then when the event happens, the capital gets destroyed and everyone is evacuating out of the capital into your faction or into another faction. So all the actions that you were used to being able to do, you can still do them, but each action spot can only be done once, and after that it becomes permanently unavailable in the game. But on top of that, to make it even more interesting, those action spots now have an additional bonus when you do them, and that bonus is kind of randomized and added as the event happens. So you wanted to like get resources, now you can get like twice the number of resources or something like that, but only once, and after that, you know, that's it, you're done. And if all those spots become unavailable, the game ends at the end of that round, or it just normally ends at the end of 7 rounds. Like, no matter what, you're only ever going to play 7 rounds of Anachrony.
Huh. So it's like you're running out of the city and you hit that shop one last time and they're like, money's worthless. Here's all the stuff.
Yeah.
Bye forever.
Yeah, but on top of that, each faction has like an evacuation condition. So the evacuation becomes a special action that everyone can take once per game, but only after the event happens again. And so it's kind of, I think thematically it's trying to say, hey, you have this philosophy of like, your philosophy is that resources are the best, so you have to have a lot of neutronium. So if you have a lot of neutronium, that's great. Your faction can now like evacuate more people from the capital and have more like of an influx of this population, meaning you get more points, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it sounds kind of cool, like that whole worker placement thing where you have so many number of workers, but then like a stopgap on how many you can actually squeeze out to certain actions. But I want to know what you think. Like, what was your first impression of actually playing it?
No, not yet. Okay, so bear with me, right? I haven't even told you the coolest thing about this game.
Oh, okay.
So the coolest thing about this game is that you can time travel, right?
Oh God, how do we forget that? Yeah, okay. How does time travel work?
Well, it works like this. So say you're like, you're short an administrator, like everything's fine, but you could just do with another person in the office to just make things work a little bit smoother. And you're like, sure. Gosh, we wish I had another administrator. So you write a note to yourself and say, dear me, can please send another administrator to past, signed, yours truly, you, XX. And then you put that note in your drawer and forget about it. And then out of thin air, whoop, administrator comes in. He's like, hi, I'm from the future.
Holy crap, that is weird. Isn't that the Bill and Ted type mechanic?
Yeah, kind of,
Yeah.
But to make things funnier, right? The time travel thing is actually what it is like a very, very funkily themed loan system, right? Because you then in the future have to like actually send that worker back to yourself. So whatever like you've borrowed from the future, you then in the future have to take that resource and actually send it back.
So it's still zero sum, just back and forth through time.
Yes, but you get extra points. You get to move up on this track that gives you like extra victory points for like completing time traveling loaning effectively to yourself. And the longer you don't send something back, the more paradoxes you're creating. And paradoxes create anomalies, which are like these buildings that you have to put on your player board that cover up like cheap building spots. But they give you like negative free victory points and they don't do anything else. And the coolest thematic bit about them, if you want to get rid of an anomaly, you have to kill a worker, meaning you send the dude into the anomaly or lady and they die.
They just kind of cancel each other out, like, oh, anomaly fixed.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, like, and and talking of dudes and ladies, so there's a type of worker in this game that are called geniuses, and in terms of artistic representation, all the geniuses in this game are women, which I thought was genius.
Wow, this sounds like a video game. Like, this sounds like there's so much stuff going on here. Like,
Yeah.
Is it easy to spin all these plates mechanically? Not just like what you're thinking about, but
No.
it sounds like it's asking you to do a lot of work.
It's
like, busy work, like moving cardboard around and making sure this plus that equals the other thing, so you're not cheating on accident.
God,
right?
no. So there's a lot of moving parts in this game, and when I say a lot, I'm not really painting a good picture. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in this game. I think the tough part is really not the sort of business of it all, because there's like surprisingly few different worker placement spots, and once you learn the symbology, everything's kind of clear. I think the problem is actually explaining the game, because there's no other game that takes so long to explain as Anachrony does, because there are just so many different things in it. When I say it's not the most complicated game, I'm lying. It is the most complicated game I've played. But it's not a game that's hard to get. It's just a game that's hard to remember how everything works, especially on your first playthrough. If everything I've described to you sounds cool, right, you need to know this is a Euro game, this is a big Euro game, this is a very complicated Euro game, and there's a lot to learn, and you need to go into this game knowing that. Even our first game, normally after I play a game, I kind of have like a pretty good idea, like my general opinion of this game. Like, I mean, on the broadest terms, like, I liked it, or not quite for me, or maybe, I don't know, maybe a little blossom in a few plays. Here, I was just like, I don't yet know what to think of this at all. Nothing.
Jury is out. Well, how many times have you played it now?
I think I played it 4 times now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, by now I have a pretty good idea about how I feel about the game. But that part I kind of want to save for our, like, actual review. But there's certainly a lot of interesting things going on in Anachrony that are worth paying attention to. The one thing that I do want to mention is the minis. And I did mention how spectacular they are. But there's one problem. You only get them in 2 ways. One, you're a Kickstarter backer, meaning that if you're interested in this game and hearing about it for the first time, you're not a Kickstarter backer. And if you are a Kickstarter backer, you already have them, so you don't care. All right? Mm-hmm. Number 2, there's a limited supply of them from the publisher's website that you can buy, and apparently once they're gone, they're gone. I understand why that's the case, because Mindclash Games, it's only their second game. They're a Kickstarter-only publisher so far. And, they probably don't have the resources to make a large print run of these minis, considering that they probably are not that cheap, right? If you don't get them, the basic game just comes with cardboard hexagons that you just put your work on top of, and they represent the minis. I mean, their first game was Tricarion, right? I think most people already forgotten about Tricarion.
I never played it. I was never particularly interested in playing it because it looked like it had too much stuff for the sake of it. And it kind of sounds like Anachrony might be similar in that respect.
Yes, it is. But I have to say that, okay, without spoiling too much, I did enjoy Anachrony more than I thought I would. Because once you do get all the moving pieces, there's a surprisingly interesting game behind it. There are a lot of decisions because of just how much stuff there is. But the decisions are always interesting. And it does ask you to make these decisions quite early on before you actually do them. So there's a lot of meticulous planning that needs to go on. There's a lot of accounting that you need to do before you actually execute what you're going to do. But even if you didn't account for something, or you just missed a step, right, in your planning, there are so many options that if something went wrong, to figure out how can I actually salvage this situation and, make do of what's just happened to me. And I find that quite intriguing. But back to the minis. Sorry, there's so much to talk about this game. So the minis, I just really like them. I think they're the best minis that were printed for any game. Not because they're so spectacularly, intricate or detailed or whatever. I just think that whoever did those minis had a fantastic vision. And they're weird. And God knows I like weird. And I wish more with different things were happening in board games. And this is a very fine example of that. I love them. And I think the thing that's going to make this game continue living on, because it's already like a niche game. It's, it's a Euro game. It's a very heavy Euro game. It's not going to be for everyone. The thing that's going to make this game continue onwards is if this thing is available, But I get that, not every publisher has the ability to just print a whole print run of these minis and make sure that they're in supply. So I understand why that's happening. But I couldn't recommend getting this game without getting the minis. Although if you do, the price actually, comparatively for a box that size, is not that expensive. I think it's like $60 for the game or something like that.
That doesn't sound too bad. I mean, I would totally play it without the minis. I mean, I'm sure the minis are cool, but I'm much more interested in the mechanics inside a box, and then art and all that kind of stuff is nice. And I like the minis in Scythe, but I would have been fine without the minis in Scythe, if that makes sense. And I'm sure, and these might be much nicer than that, but at the end of the day, those kind of things are eye candy to me. And it's a shame that that's not a standard thing in the box. I'm sure that a lot of people are really going to like that and might be disappointed because I'm sure all the cool, pretty looking photos online are going to have the minis. And if you buy it and then you get it and there's no minis, that might bum you out a little bit. But I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, from what I've heard from you talking about this game, I think it sounds interesting enough to the point that I would like to try it at some point, but not necessarily enough to go out and grab. Mostly just because, I'm always the one who teaches the rules to games, or almost always in my groups. And that kind of sounds like a lot of hard work. And I tend to gravitate towards games that have a simpler rule set, like not necessarily easier to play. In fact, I really like it when a game has a simpler rule set and still lots and lots of stuff to think about. And it sort of feels like this goes in the opposite direction. And I don't know, if it's hard for me to remember all the rules and then teach them, I'm sure the people around the table are going to be missing them as well. So I guess I'm hesitantly, mildly interested in giving this a shot. I'm sure it's pretty, but I don't know if I'm necessarily sold on it.
It's certainly overwrought. I mean, I can't take that away from it. It has so many things added into it. And you can kind of play the most stripped down version of it, right? You can just take out every possible module you can take away from it, right? And just play that sort of, I don't want to use the word basic because it's really not the right word, but you can play the basic game. And you might have fun. I don't know. I did after my second game.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have sort of similar taste in games, so I look forward to seeing your review and seeing all these pretty pictures on it. So I have a worker placement game I want to tell you about.
Is that the segue? There's 2 worker placement games in a row.
That was accidental, and I realized, when you were talking about how worker placement games kind of need a quirk, like something to really make them stand out. I was like, that second game we're going to play is one of those as well. And so that one, or I guess the second game we're going to talk about, is Ave Roma. And I got this one through Kickstarter. I guess that's another similarity between these two.
Wow.
And this is a worker placement Euro game. I mean, and you look at this and you're like, yep, that's a Euro game. It's got a big illustrated version of the Mediterranean Sea on it. You got Rome, and you have buildings and colosseums and all sorts of very tropey stuff. And right from the get-go, the catch on this game, it's a worker placement game where the workers are all a neutral color. They're all white. You don't have your own workers. You share them and pass them back and forth between each other constantly throughout the game. So at the beginning of the game, you have 5 of them, and they have values of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on them. And in the middle of this circular board, which is kind of cool, like circular boards in the middle of tables, you don't see that very often. There are a whole bunch of different worker placement spots that you can go to. And the game does this thing. I mean, at its heart, you are turning resources into victory points through a variety of ways. But what it asks you to go through a couple hoops that can be kind of interesting. And where you put that worker down, you might be really happy that it's a low value worker, or you might be really sad that it's a low value worker. So low value workers are not inherently poor. It's just they're better at certain parts of the game versus others, if that makes sense.
Right, but then it goes away and your opponents might nab them for some reason?
Yeah, so what happens is, you do worker placement, and this is the style of game where you put the worker down, then you evaluate the spot, and the next person takes their turn. And then once the round is over, and I'll go into some of the other stuff in a bit, but once the round is over, you go in reverse player order with people being able to grab all of the workers from specific worker placement spots.
Oh, so it's like drafting.
Yeah, exactly. You're drafting the workers back into your area. So, for instance,
cool.
There's one spot on the board that says take twice the amount of money equal to the value of the worker you put down on there. So, obviously, you want to throw your 5 down there, right? So you get $10. Money is super tight in this game. And so you do that, and the person to your left does that, and maybe somebody else puts a 4 down there, and then you get to the reverse drafting bit, and the first person says, I'll have 2 5s and a 4, thank you very much.
So they grab all the workers from that one spot?
Yes, up to a limit of 5.
That's tasty.
Yeah, it is. But again, high numbers are not always a good thing, because going around the outside of the circular board, there are 3 different card markets, essentially, sliding markets where oftentimes in games, when you have a sliding market, they get kind of cheaper the longer they've been out. But the twist in this game is that the first one to pop out can only be picked up, bought from the market with a value 1 pawn. And once it slides down, now it can be picked up with a 1 or a 2. And once it gets to the very end of the market, it can be picked up by a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So those high-level pawns are awesome at getting you money, and they're also good at a couple other spots. But when it comes to actually drafting the cards from the board, which might give you victory points, also might give you engine, might give you endgame victory point conditions, you want low value ones because you'll have a much broader variety of ones you can pick. So what we found, I've only played this one time, and it was a 3-player game with my friends Claire and Evan, and we all liked it. We were scratching our heads on several times where we're just like, yeah, I'm having fun. This is good, right? Yeah, we're having fun. And it was like, I guess it's sort of like what you said with Anachrony. Like, after the first game, I do want to play it again. I'm not really sure what my overall opinion is of it, but I was very intrigued. And part of it was because, in the very beginning, I went first, and then my friend Evan went last, and we got to the drafting, and he just grabbed the 5s and the 4s and all the big stuff. But once we got into the middle parts of the game, when things got a little bit tighter and our goals were more clearly defined, we were being much more choosy about the workers we drafted back. Like, maybe we'd get a 5 and a 2 from that spot. Or maybe we go over here and just grab 3 1s or something like that. And that is very interesting. It's a very cool thing. Also, you can train your workers. You can put them on a spot on your board, maybe spending some amount of money to change their value. So it's very flexible when it comes to the options the game provides you. You just lose a little bit of tempo when you do that.
John, I am very intrigued because it sounds like at the start of the game, it's very likely that similar value workers are going to get clumped up into the same space. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
And the board becomes modular in that way because like new values get unlocked. And then once you kind of like have a strategy going, then it becomes less predictable because like you said, you could have like a 5 and a 2 in the same space, correct?
Yeah, because, so in the middle of the board, there is a 4th card section, and these are territories that you are trying to have influence in. And this is kind of where the majority of the points come from. And honestly, I'm not going to go into the specifics of how this works too much because it's going to be hard to describe in an audio format. But let's say you want to go to territory number 4. Guess what worker you need to use?
No, with the number 4 on it. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And you want to, let's say you really need the resources in territory number 1. You need to put a number 1 over there. So there are a couple of these worker placement spots that you go to evaluate these territories. that will have a variety. Like so they are not necessarily high or not necessarily low. So essentially, there are around the outside of the board, the lower values will congregate. On that one money spot, the higher ones will congregate. Also, there is another Colosseum bit where higher values will congregate. I'm not going to go into how that one works, but higher is better for that one. And then you have these middle ones that'll just have a complete mishmash, a variety, depending on the different regions that are out there, because the region cards can be used in 3 different worker placement spots. One lets you just harvest the resources from the spot. Another one lets you go over there and trade with them, which lets you sell stuff. And the last one lets you kind of conquer it and actually put influence down onto that spot, which is going to get you a bunch of points at the end of the game.
So here's the thing. I get how the worker placement works in this game, right? But worker placement is always tied to another mechanism that probably generates you points somehow. So is this like engine building, or what's the element of strategy?
Well, I guess there's a little bit of engine building here, but I would not say it's strong there. I think, I guess resource gathering to a certain degree. So one thing I haven't mentioned yet, and this is also really neat, it's a minor little subtle neatness, but everybody has their own player board that snugs up next to the big circular board, and you have 6 different goods on that board. And everybody's board is different. You have the same 6 goods, but everybody values each good differently. So for me, wood might be worth $3 each. And for my friend Evan, it might be worth $1 each, which means we are not always, everyone around the table, going to be jumping at wood because it's a high value thing. It's high value for me and low value for them. In addition to this, you can only have, I think, 4 or 5 of each resource, but every time you take more resources on top of that, it becomes surplus, which is just like a bag of stuff, and then you have a surplus track, and then there are the many cards on the board that are military cards that require lots of surplus to get these military cards, which has a little bit of set collection. The more shields you get, the more bonuses you get, the more swords you acquire, the more bonuses you get. So there's all these systems that work together in a pretty intriguing way, the way you're kind of incentivized to try and get lots of maybe your cheap resource because you can buy that for cheap and then turn that into surplus by keeping it pegged out. So you're incentivized not to get rid of that cheap resource, and then you get your expensive ones to turn into money. And so I guess to the short answer after a long answer to your question is set collection. Like you're trying to get resources, the right number of resources to then purchase those cards around the board. You need the right number of pawn, but you also might need 2 wood and a pot of wine and that kind of thing.
I was going to make a surplus wood joke, but I then thought a little bit better. It sounds like this game is probably better with more players because there's more workers to draft. There's more people going for different resources, if that makes sense. Kind of, it just sounds like you are getting in each other's hair, and it's quite an aggressive game, probably in some respects.
We played a 3-player game. I think it plays 2 to 5. And I left it thinking that I would really like to try it at 4 and never, ever in a million years played at 5 because downtime is going to be crushing, honestly.
Yeah, of course.
There's so much to think about. We were thinking a lot, honestly, in the 3-player game, but every single worker placement spot on the board scales to the player count. Every single worker placement location on the board, I'm sorry, that's a lie. All the non-card drafting locations on the board scale. So if it's a 3-player game, you can put 3 pawns there. And et cetera, for the other player counts. So yes, in that respect, I did wonder if in the 4-player game, it would be tighter with the card rows around the outside that do not scale. Because, so one section is kind of buildings, and you just straight up turn resources into buildings, get points, and if there's a little bit of set collection there, because there's 2 of each, one in the deck. One's the plans for the building, and one's the building itself. And you get a bonus if you do both. One of them is military, I already talked about that. You spend surplus. And the last one is senators. It's a bunch of old, ugly dudes. And this is where the engine building comes into play, because for these people, they pretty much just need tons of money. You're spending so much money hiring these people in, and all of them give you an ongoing benefit throughout the game that let you break the rules in some way, or maybe over-incentivize certain spots. And then all of them also have a endgame point conversion thing that just you get. So to a certain degree, we were thinking it felt vaguely Concordia-esque in that respect, with just that one small part of the board where you're grabbing these cards that not only give you in-game benefits, but also modify your endgame scoring conditions. And I really like those. For instance, so the money spot, I got 2 different senators who gave me bonuses for the money spot. One of them made me get more money, and another one let me harvest resources from the region that matched the pawn that I put on the money spot. So I kept going there. I was really incentivized to do that. And I kind of forgot where I started on this little tangent here. But either way, I do enjoy the little bit of engine building that's going on there. But it's just one more of the many things that is here. And yeah, what do you think, Efka?
Well, no, I'm with you. All dudes give you victory points. I understand that. What do you think? I don't know. I guess what I have to say is that you got me excited about this game just based on the mechanisms. And it's not the first time I heard about Ave Roma. And I have to say, I've seen how it looks, and it didn't quite particularly strike me as a very attractive game.
So actually, I want to butt in right here.
Yeah.
This was a bit of a thing. When the game went live on Kickstarter, it has this board with, I don't know, bland-ish colors, and it was very usable, and apparently a lot of people complained. They said, this board is ugly. And so the Kickstarter people running it, they said, okay, we're going to listen to you. We're going to go back to our artists. We're going to make a new board. It's going to be beautiful, and you're going to love it. So they did that, and they printed that on one side, and they printed the old board on the other.
Wow, okay.
Describe the board you saw.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I saw the bland one, I suppose, because I remember it being on the Kickstarter. So, yeah, maybe that's the thing.
That's probable. So we actually played it with the bland side. And the reason for that is because the other side is gorgeous. It's beautifully illustrated, and it is so busy. Like it's honestly difficult to see where you're supposed to go with the worker placement spots. And for this, I just come back to, you know what? Sometimes Eurogames just don't have to be pretty. You know, it really is form over function when it comes to these games, and I think that they actually kind of tripped up. And I'm glad that it was printed on both sides because I think maybe I'll try the other one at some point, but I would rather do the bland, ugly side and not kind of forget where I'm supposed to put my workers.
I suppose, but I disagree that board games aren't meant to be pretty. I mean, Euro games aren't meant to be pretty, because I don't want to mention Vito Lacerda again, because I'm going to sound like a Vito Lacerda fanboy, which I am, you know. So there's that. But I feel like his new boards for the Gallerist and Vignos are very pretty, but also at the same time very functional. And it feels like a lot of work has went in to make sure that they are functional. And to the point where, like, I think Ian O'Toole undeniably is the best board game artist out there.
I do really enjoy his stuff. I would agree. And I guess I didn't mean to make a hardline statement there. Like, I'm all about my games being pretty, but I will take an ugly game over a beautiful game that obstructs the playability, if that makes sense.
Going back to Anachrony, the same thing. Like, it's a very pretty board, but so remember I mentioned that Anachrony is asymmetrical in terms of factions?
Yeah.
There are so many actually tiny little asymmetrical bits to every faction and they're kind of, sometimes they are portrayed on the boards mechanically, and sometimes they are not. Like, there are a few little by rules that you just don't notice anywhere. Maybe they are, maybe I just haven't noticed them, right? But that's the problem. Like, it's not like there's no little reminder to remind me about every single little thing. And of course, because there are so many things, you maybe can't even fit every single thing onto it. But I think, like, Anachrony almost hit the spot in terms of artistic quality. Sometimes because its art is sometimes weird, like sculptures are wonderful. The art is hit and miss from time to time. Yeah, I just wish, I guess I want perfection, you know? I want the game to be beautiful, but also functional, right? And that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world.
In a perfect Ian O'Toole world.
Where all games are done by Ian O'Toole. Yeah, I really like his stuff. I guess the one last thing to say about Ave Roma before we kind of wrap this one up is this game came with modules. It came with, first of all, an advanced rule set in the base game right from the get-go, where every single card has different little icons in the top corners, which usually don't matter. But you could play with this advanced game, and you could spend these cards to get bonus actions, and each spot on the board has a little illustrated bonus extra thing down there. It says, well, if you're playing the advanced game, you do this stuff as well, and it kind of tweaks things around. And usually, when I open up a game and I see there's the basic game and the advanced game, I'm like, okay, we're playing the advanced game. Why would I play the basic game? And then I read the rules and I said, why would I play the advanced game? And I played it without the advanced game, and I'm still right there. It does feel like this game has a lot of different plates that you're spinning, and that's great. But it feels like they tried to fit a little bit more in, and stuff kind of started coming out the ears, if that makes sense. You know, just I haven't actually played it yet, but it felt like less is more. I'm glad they split it up this way so that you have these two different options. But I felt like I had way more than enough stuff to think about already. to not also think about how I'm going to consume each individual card to get a special bonus ability that's different on every single one of the worker placement spots, that just did not seem necessary to me.
It's weird how the two games we talked about, without us knowing at all, are just so incredibly similar, because that's exactly the case with Anachrony as well. Like, you have way too many. Like, so remember I mentioned how much I love the minis? Did I say how much I love the minis in Anachrony yet?
I think you did, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a whole set of extra, like, minis that, like, you only use with a specific module, and unlike the other miniatures, they're not like faction specific, and they say like if you want to use these but you don't want to play with this module, you can just substitute like your faction minis for these like other minis that are otherwise not used unless you're playing with that module. But then I kind of don't want to, because I'm like, but this is my faction, like I'm supposed to like thematically represent them with these miniatures, right? And then I don't. And the problem with that is that the ones that almost never get used are like the coolest looking ones, because they have all these faces on all the sides of them, and they look really weird, and I really like them.
You could just sit there and play with them, like just, when it's not your turn, just like sandbox style.
I mean, who told you that I don't? Anyway, how about we actually talk about a game that I can guarantee is absolutely nothing like the other two we've just talked about.
Let's do it.
John, I have been on a train ride, and that train ride is called Escape Games in board game format. And I would tell you right now, I do not want to escape from this train ride at all. I just want to keep going and going and going. But it looks like I won't be able to go for much longer, because the two main ones, the two big ones, I'm almost done with them. I've got one box left of escaping, and then I'll escape forever, and we'll have to wait until more things are printed. I know there are a couple of other escape games out there, but they're not as widely available as I'd like them to be. So the two main ones, we've already looked at Unlock at our podcast, and also on my channel we did a review together with Elaine, but there is Exit. And now if you had to choose between Exit and Unlock, which ones should you get? I have to sadly tell you that you have to get all of them, because they're all very, very good. And I know you in particular have a very big problem, because
I live in the United States, and apparently they don't distribute any of these games to the United States, at least not in a timely fashion. I'm really jealous of the fact that you have done so much escaping. I put a pre-order in for Unlock. Obviously, that has not shown up yet. And then, these Exit games. I've been to several escape rooms in person, and I've really enjoyed them. My wife Jessica freaking loves them, and so like she's super excited to try these games. I've told her about them. I just need to acquire them, and I don't know a lot about Exit. What I know is the Unlock games, there's no destruction. You can just put it back in the box and give it to somebody else, and they can play through the whole game. And I know that in Exit there is some destruction, and that's where I exit the knowledge.
Oh, it's so fantastic.
So what's going on with Exit? What's going on there?
Okay, so you're right. You do have to destroy it. And when I played my first game of Exit, I was really hoping, like, can we maybe just somehow, I don't know, can we skirt around this? And the answer is no. You cannot skirt around it. At least in one of them, it certainly was a lot more destroyable, like required destruction to actually figure out the puzzles. And the one thing that the box never mentions to you, because it tells you, oh, hey, don't read these rules. Like, read the rules together out loud with all the players. The one misstep it makes there, sure, it makes sense to read out all the rules to all the players. It doesn't tell you that when you are about to play this game, you should prepare yourself with not just a pen and a piece of paper, but also scissors, right?
Scissors? That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of do without scissors, but I'd say that would be tremendously inconvenient. And it's not a problem if you're, like, at home. And I presume most households these days have scissors, Ours do. I don't know about yours, listeners. If you have any thoughts about whether your households have scissors or not, please do write in. God. But yeah, so the first one I was playing at a local club, which is like at this weird scout hut place. Anyway, it was just lucky enough that they did have scissors, and one person that was playing on a different table also had a pen and pieces of paper, so we were fine. But you really need these things, right?
I'm assuming this one's timed as well, so you're like frantically trying to find the goods we need?
No, and that's number one difference. There is no timer, right? Except there kind of is. It asks you to start a stopwatch and just see how long it takes you to do.
Oh, okay.
And then at the end of the game, you get to compare basically based on how many clues you used and how much time it took you to complete it, and it will give you a score like stars out of 10. And that's kind of totally cool. By the way, if you don't, I guess we haven't really briefed on what this is. This is Escape the Room Adventures in a little box, and you take the box and you open it with your friends and you play it over an evening, and once you're done, you know. And it's the same with Unlock and the same with Exit, but as we've said, Exit is destructible, so you can't really even pass it on.
So you throw this one in the trash when you're done. You're super done.
Yeah, it was so hard because we had this like box of stuff that was memories, and like, but it's extra shelf space, so into the bin you go, you know.
Hey man, I still have my Pandemic Legacy Season 1 box under my bed.
Fair enough.
It's on the shelf, but I haven't gotten rid of it for that reason. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But yeah, it's weird when you have memories tied into little pieces of cardboard and I guess cut up pieces of paper.
Yeah, well, you know what? On the other hand, though, a lot of the players on our table were really into destroying everything. They're just like, yeah, let's cut it all up. And it's this weird sense because the way Exit works, it's like you're not quite sure whether you should be cutting things up or not.
Huh.
And you always feel like this sort of sense of trepidation, especially if you're playing Exit for the first time. Like if you're playing it for the second time, you're kind of like, yeah, we should, it's fine, let's cut this, right? Like, let's start destroying things. But the first time you play it, you're like, I don't know whether we should be doing this, right? And so far, the game never led us astray, right? Whenever we felt like we had to, like, destroy something, I don't want to give away specifically what we were doing.
Right, of course.
But whenever we needed to mangle components, let's say that, right? We always got it right, and it always led to something, and that was kind of cool because sometimes through the mangling of these components, revelations come up, right? And that's so cool because you don't get that feeling in Unlock. What you do get in Unlock, however, compared to Exit, is a much more streamlined mechanism, right? And it's so hard to talk about these games, but Unlock feels very straightforward, and you just instinctively know how to do it. And sometimes to the point where the puzzles aren't even puzzles, you just kind of do things in Unlock and things happen, right? And that's exciting, and it gives you this sort of rush because especially you're on a timer. With Exit, you ponder more and you think more, but the puzzles are slightly more intricate and at the same time more rewarding because whilst they might be hard to figure out, when you do figure it out, it gives you this immense feeling of satisfaction. B, you have a set of clues. And unlike for every puzzle, and unlike in Unlock, the clues are layered in 3 tiers. So the first is kind of, we're pointing you in the right direction, and maybe you don't feel like this revealed a lot, but actually if you read the clue carefully, like it'll trigger something in your brain that goes, oh, I didn't think about that. Right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. The second clue, I mean, if you don't know how to do it after reading the second clue, then you're really not thinking about this very hard. And then the final clue is not a clue.
It's just the answer.
Straight up, yeah, it tells you how to do it, right? So, I mean, and I guess there are sometimes situations where your brain is just not seeing things, right?
Yeah.
And
you could just miss something on a card, right? You just like don't see a thing maybe.
Yeah. But I felt like that worked very well with minor exceptions. There were certain clues, and for one specific adventure, there was a clue for the very last puzzle, meaning like you do this and you win, right?
Yeah.
That if you flip the first clue card, it pretty much gives away the entire puzzle.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, and we didn't have to do that, thankfully, but we looked at the clues after we finished the game and we're like, wait a minute, and we puzzled on that, bit for quite a long time. Like there were 6 of us playing and we were all like, oh my God, how do we do this? How do we do this? And then after some time, we're like, we know how to do this. This is the most amazing feeling ever. And then when we finished it, like, we looked at the clues and we're like, I'm sure glad we didn't look at that clue, because that would have just totally ruined the evening.
Well, it's cool that they have those in there. I doubt we'll use them much, mostly just because the people I play with in these kind of things are very fervently anti any cluing of any sort. But I don't know. I can't really say I don't have the perspective without being there. I know I will get there. I know I will play all of these games as soon as I realistically can. Because, I mean, just talking to you for sure, but also seeing things online and whatnot, these just seem like really great experiences. I just hope that they get out of Europe at some point. I guess I could import a copy of Unlock, but I guess there's a regular US distribution one coming out soon, and I have no idea what's going on with Exit. That one I might have to pay some overseas fees to see.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say it's worth it, but I feel like, I don't know, I just had a really great experience with them. And I only have one box of Exit left. I've done all the Unlock ones, and I'm treasuring that one because I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. And there's a few other things that kind of felt, I don't know, like, they're both great games, but they both suffer in different places. So both games have puzzles that make you think, like, outside the box, not like lateral thinking, if you know what I mean, right? And there's a lot more lateral thinking in Exit, but it makes more sense within the game for some reason. And the same puzzles that made me feel in Unlock, oh, this is just obnoxious and annoying, right? For some reason in Exit, those things didn't quite happen. But on the other hand, Unlock is much more visually cohesive and has a lot more visual puzzles because it's a very visual game. The artwork in Unlock is absolutely fantastic. And sometimes the visual puzzles in it are annoying, but a lot of the times, because you have so much visual feedback given to you, right? You can picture the entire setting, the puzzle where you're at, like, much better. And they're so much more vivid. Oh, I don't know. Then there are these, like, there's these little bits of writing in Exit that do kind of make it excellent. I wouldn't even know which one to choose over if I had to choose, because there's so much of a muchness. And I really couldn't say whether one was better or not. They're just a little bit different, but both really, really good experiences.
Well, I hope to try both. I think if I had to pick one or the other, it would probably be Exit, just because, not being locked into one replayable mechanism probably allows them to be a little bit more off the wall and do kooky things, and that kind of stuff is fun. But yeah, I think we probably shouldn't talk much more about this one on the accidental giving too much away. I'd like to do both of these, but and I'm jealous.
Did I give anything away, John?
I don't think so. I mean, besides scissors, but I know where my scissors are, so that probably wouldn't be a problem.
I should give that one away because, my God, tell people you need scissors on the back of the box. It's important.
And then don't run with them, right?
Yeah, and don't run with them. Yeah, make sure you include that message. and then if you feel really like you're kind of looking out for your customers, ask them whether, scissors are a common thing in their household, and ask to send feedback back to the publisher. And that way you open up a two-way communication.
You could certainly do that. Another thing you could certainly do is keep sending us emails. And we've gotten a few of them, and I think now's a pretty good time for us to go through some of the questions we got, right?
Yes, about scissors or not.
I don't remember seeing scissors in any of these.
No, okay. But the first email is from Brad Skaggs, who is a fan of No Pun Included, because he constantly gets in touch with us over Twitter, and so is his partner. They always communicate with us, which is a very, very nice thing. So hi, Brad. And Brad also says hi. He says good morning. I have to disappoint you, Brad. It's like 1 a.m. right now in the United Kingdom, so you got that wrong already. What does a normal week of content creation look like for both of you? How much time is spent in preparation and editing compared to actual time in front of the camera? Really enjoying the content, Brad.
Well, I think it's different for both of us, right? We do very different styles. I'd say normal week of content creation for me. Well, I mean, I have a weird job, so I oftentimes have Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays off. And whenever I have a day off, it pretty much is a John Gets Games day. I wake up in the morning, I eat some breakfast, and then I try to get down to the studio and start recording something. I oftentimes have stuff edited, stuff that needs editing, and I'll do that kind of at night or in the between recording because I just get sick of talking at a camera in an empty room. But I'd say that I don't do that much preparation for my videos, and I think that's the big difference between the two of us.
Yeah, probably.
For my playthroughs, my preparation is I read the rules, and sometimes I play it, or sometimes I don't. Honestly, some of the playthroughs I record, that's the first time and oftentimes only time I play a game, because then I put it in the mail and send it to somebody else because it's for a Kickstarter or something like that. For my reviews, I mean, obviously there's the time spent playing the game, but as far as actual prep for the video, it usually varies between 15 and 30 minutes of kind of coming up with an outline. And that 15 to 30 minutes is usually spread out over many days. So it's like lots of like 1 to 2 minute chunks where I sit down in front of a little spreadsheet and I'm like, man, I cannot come up with a negative for this game. And then I just think about it more. And then at a certain point I might be like, okay, well, no negatives. Or I'll be, oftentimes, honestly, I'll be in the middle of recording a review and I'm like, oh my gosh, how could I have forgotten this one thing? And I'll just like go into my spreadsheet, edit it, and then, just kind of tack it right in. So I'm a lot more freeform with my style, but I'm also just kind of like, my thing is essentially a podcast, right? I mean, I'm on screen and I show you some photos for some context, but I don't entertain like you guys do. And that's why you guys you fully script and you guys go crazy, right?
First world problem, John. But I do not feel sorry for you that you can't come up with a negative and you have to think about it for 2 minutes. Oh my God. That just sounds painful to me because so I guess a normal week it really depends. So we try to film when both of us are available, and sometimes we just decide that like it's going to be just me and in a video, but that largely depends on whether Elaine is very tired that week or not, because unlike me, she also goes and does a full-time job, aside from doing this. I'll spend a lot of the time script writing because that's one of the things I do. But before that, we'll obviously play games, and we'll try to play a game at least a minimum of 2 times. But it's almost never just 2 times. It's almost like 4 or 5 is the sort of average, and then sometimes it'll even go up to 8 or 10 or something like that. It's completely crazy. And we'll talk about these games with each other, and we'll make notes, and we'll sometimes record our conversations after the game, just that we have a reference of how we felt about certain things, because we find that you can make notes and you can do shorthand and stuff like that, but the real details come out in actual conversations when we talk about them. And then I'll collate these into a script and try to make some sort of a cohesive sense out of that, and I'll either do it at home, but I also kind of suffer from ADHD, so I need a lot of input in my life. So sometimes I just go to a coffee shop with my headphones on, so I have a lot of visual input, I have a lot of audio input, and then in that space I can kind of be creative. So that helps me a lot. And so that's the first part of the week, and then we'll normally film for about a day or 2, and it often depends on how complicated the sketch is. If there is a sketch that's quite involved, it'll often take up an entire day, because let's say we dreamt up a sketch where we thought like, we need to go to London to film some of these bits, so that journey just takes up an entire day. And so script writing for like at least 2 days, filming sometimes a day or 2 days, playing the games a lot, and then editing is the easy part. Editing is like my chill zone. I just kind of sit down.
Oh yeah.
And it takes me about, I guess, 5 hours, often no more than 5 hours to edit it. And and then it's the boring stuff, like upload and stuff like that.
Yeah, that stuff takes up quite a bit of time too. I think I undersold my prep time to a certain degree, because every time I play a game that I'm going to be reviewing, after the end, I ask for input from like the people I play. Like, so what'd you think? And then if they say something like, I actually try to get into conversations. And so it's really hard to put a number down on the prep time for the review bits, but actual time sitting in front of a spreadsheet, putting the outline in, it's usually not very much for me. I think I probably spend, I don't know, 25, 30% of my time in front of a camera versus not in front of a camera doing all the editing and uploading of all that. But it really does vary.
But we have another question, don't we?
Yeah, this one comes from Taylor Lovell. Lavelle or something like that. Sorry, Taylor. Oh yeah, so they want to know about a little bit more about the trials and tribulations, I guess, of being a board game reviewer. You know, how it dictates our time and how we try to only cover stuff that the audience really wants to see, and how that's how do we have to apply this to our table regularly. And I guess they just want to know. They said that they played Agricola last night, and they believe it's the one game that Rado plays quite frequently. Although I don't actually think he does. He just played it a million times in the past, and they just want to know how you resist, I guess, playing the old stuff that you like versus pushing out the stuff that you have to review. I mean, what do you think about that, man?
Oh, this is such a tricky question because it's kind of the thing that's been really bothering me lately, and it is bothering me because not only is it affecting me personally, but every like reviewer I talk to seems to be suffering from the same thing right now. When I went to see Richard, like I said to him, "Hey, let's play paperback or whatever." He's like, "Yeah, but I'd really like to play this game that I have to make a run through for because I have to, and I don't think I have actually the time to play anything else."
Yeah,
and I could totally feel that. I'm like, I get it, yeah, but at the same time, when does this? I mean, don't get me wrong. I treat this like work because, not because, I don't know. I think I want to take a professional stance because I like what I do, and not only I like what I do, I respect what I do. If that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Like I don't respect myself. I respect the work, and I think it needs to be treated accordingly, right? But at the same time, games are just such a passion for me. And I think they are for everyone who's listening, whether they're reviewers or not. It doesn't even matter, right? And I think something gets lost if you stop playing games that you enjoy playing and just play games because, well, I have this review pile and I have to focus on that because that's work and I have to treat that professionally.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you start to lose some glimmer that goes on there. And I mean, for me, so one specific question Taylor asked was if there are any games that either of us just can't resist playing, even though we're supposed to be, working, playing a game that we're supposed to be reviewing. I can't think of any in particular one, but I will say that the way it works for me is I oftentimes try to work in older Euros that I really like that are on my shelf, kind of in a rotation, occasionally around the games that I want to review. And also, I think I have less of a zeal to get the games I need to review to the table as quickly as everybody else does because I also do playthroughs. Like some people only do reviews. You only do review videos, and that's your main source of content. And that's part of the reason I started making playthrough videos is because I have this game and I'd want to cover it in some way, and I didn't want to just force my friends to sit down and play this 3 times so that I could say I'd played it 3 times. And that's why sometimes my reviews are really late. I mean, I keep meaning to get out to review Feast for Odin, and at that game came out months and months and months ago. I feel like I want to play it one more time, but I'm not forcing it to happen. Instead, last week I played Fresco, and I could have tried to make Feast for Odin happen there, but instead I played a 6-year-old game, and I really enjoyed playing that 6-year-old game that I'm not planning on covering on my channel or anything. So I think it comes back to balance. I mean, that's a really boring answer, but I think if you go pedal to the metal and you only cover the games that you have to cover for the channel, I just don't think that's long-term viable. I mean, maybe some people can pull it off. It seems like Tom Bassel does a pretty good job. But as far as I'm concerned, I need to make sure that I'm occasionally, like 1 in 3 games I play, I'm like, okay, this is for the channel. And the other 2, it's either something I want to play or I'm just like, hey, friend, what do you want to play? We'll play whatever you want to play. And just to keep mixing things up so that you don't lose the fun here. Because that really is how we started, right?
You'll burn out, right? And I've been coming up with creative ways to kind of incorporate playing older games and also like find the time for that to be useful somehow for the channel. And the one thing that we're doing right now is our Kickstarter campaign's over, but like some people that backed at like voter levels, they get to basically once a month vote on one of the videos that we'll make a game about. And we decided that those games are not going to be like the hot new stuff. Those games are going to be games that have been around for a while. It doesn't matter if it's like a very long while or not, but because we kind of see value in going back to the games that have been around long enough, and have that staying power that they still captivate our attention. And, you know, we didn't necessarily have the time to review it, or we weren't even around back then to review it, right?
Sure, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, and it is kind of for the channel, and it isn't, because here's the thing: if the way YouTube works, if you get something out that's not very current and relevant, you know, you'll get a lot less hits, because there are a lot of people who already covered that stuff, and they're already getting the hits.
Yep.
But I've kind of gotten to the point where I just stopped caring about that. And like, I gotta find some, I don't know, some passion in doing this. And I'm not saying that I don't have passion, but I can see myself getting into a place where I don't feel that passion anymore, and I'm gonna do everything to avoid that.
Yeah, I think just being self-aware is the most important thing here. Next up, we've got Will D. He asked us a question. He said, what advice do you have for someone who has a backlog of unplayed games? Jumping into the hobby just about a year ago, I've purchased far more than I played. Should I stop buying altogether? How do I trick people into playing those games? Is this how you guys feel sometimes? Well, from my perspective,
can I just say something?
Yeah, you can.
Please do not trick people into playing games.
That's true. Yes.
Sound like a thing.
Like, surprise, maybe they'll like it. Yeah, no, I mean, from my perspective, it depends on the time of the year. Like right now, I'm answering this question, and I'm like, I don't really have much of a pile of backlogged unplayed games, but it's also April,
I do.
And Essen happened a while ago. That's true. But I also did not go to any of these massive conventions last year, and I am hoping to this year, so it might be a little bit different for me. But speaking as someone who's been crazy about board games for 9 years now, and I have a floating collection of about 200 games, but I've probably sold hundreds of games in the past. I have definitely gone through big peaks and valleys with this stuff. And from my perspective, I think you just have to just make time for these things. Like if you just have a game night and people show up and you're like, oh, what does everybody want to play? It's not too surprising that oftentimes the shiny new thing that you really want to try does not get played because maybe somebody doesn't want to learn it. The best advice, I keep coming back with this kind of stuff, is, let's say, for instance, you have Scythe on your shelf and you just couldn't get it played. You make a day where that's what you do. You're like, come to my house. This is what we are going to do. You just make a specific plan to get those games played, and that way you can get, I think you should be able to target and hit all of them once. And in that case, maybe you're not playing Scythe twice in a given 2-month period if you want to try and get through the ones you have already. But I think you just have to be a little bit more targeted and proactive about making these games actually hit the table. And I think when it comes to like saying, no, I'm not going to buy any more games till I played all the ones I have, my only feeling there is the longer and harder you try to do that, the more you're going to want to buy new games. So I think a more measured approach of playing while buying and playing while buying is better. I mean, from my perspective, I'm not the best voice of reason. I've, obviously spent thousands and thousands of dollars on games, so I'm not a very normal person, but I think I'm somewhat average and people in the middle of this hobby, and at least probably many of the people listening to this podcast. I mean, you still have a big pile of unplayed games, Efka. What do you do?
I would say that if you do want people to come over for a day and play games with you, then maybe make a lot of nice food. Or if you can't make a lot of nice food, order a lot of nice food. And, people will want to come over because they'll be like, there's free food and games. Yes, let's do that. I don't know. I don't do anything specifically. Like, I just I take it one at a time. And if something gets unplayed, I lament it a little bit. But I always kind of want to make sure that I don't just like get a game and then I never play a game and then I sell the game because I never played it and I never got around to it. So I don't know. I think another good way is to maybe give away a game that you don't seem to be playing to a friend, and you can say to them, look, I'm giving this to you under the caveat that you learn the stupid rules and teach me how to play it, and then we'll play it at some point.
That's creative.
Yeah, and maybe that'll never happen, or maybe it will. Who knows? But I think it's just a better way of doing it than just like, well, I got this game and now I'm gonna sell it and I'm gonna make a little bit of a loss, but whatever. I don't know. I'm always a very big believer of like, just play with your stupid toys that you bought. And that comes from like having a comic book background, I guess, because I worked at a comic book shop, and Elaine's dad is a big comic book collector, and he always said the same thing. Like, I always read my comics. I don't just like, I don't buy one and not read it and then put it in a sleeve in case it's worth thousands years on later. And, you know, just play with your damn toys. You know, if you have a like action figure, don't just keep it in a stupid box. And this is terrible advice. This is terrible financial advice, because if you follow my advice, your toys won't be worth anything, right? But come on, just like, you know, have a little bit of soul and find a reason to, I don't know, just enjoy them. And yeah, there are sometimes too many games, but I don't want to advise you to buy less games, because I just think you're going to be unhappy because you clearly buy these games because you want to buy them. You know,
Yeah.
maybe impose a restriction on yourself. If I buy a game, I'm going to read the darn rulebook at least.
Well, that's one piece of advice I have too, is when you get that new game, take it out of shrink, punch all the cardboard, look at all the cards. I know some people talk about these piles of in shrink games they have that they haven't gotten to. I don't understand that. The moment a game enters my house, even if I have really more pressing things to do, if I'm in the middle of lunch and the doorbell rings, I will rip open that game and I will take all the plastic off and take a look at all the insides. And I think if that's something that you don't do yet, maybe give that a shot, because that will just give you a little bit of inertia to get into this thing, and maybe you'll find yourself actually reading the rulebook right there, and oh, the cards are right there, and you can kind of really feel through all this stuff. And also, once that's done, maybe you try to play a game against yourself to really understand the rules. And they're just, at that point, you're playing with your toys, like you mentioned. I think just all these little things will hopefully help you get through your current pile.
John, I feel like we're turning into the Agony and podcast of board games, but I have one last email from Chris K, who is writing in with not one, with not two, but 3 questions. And he also had some nice words to say about us, but I'll skip those just for brevity's sake. But thank you very much for the nice words. And question number 1, what was the first game that really got you excited about the hobby? I don't necessarily mean what was your first gaming experience. I'm more interested in the game that got your attention after you really started gaming.
After I really started gaming, that's interesting. I mean, my gateway game was Settlers of Catan. Like so many people, we only had that. We played that for a year.
Yeah, same here.
20 times and loved the heck out of it. What really, I guess after Settlers of Catan, I mean, that was around the time that Dominion came out. I remember the first time I played Descent, Journeys in the Dark. That was around that first year that I got in, and I kind of freaked out and went and spent $100 and bought it and loved it until I stopped loving it. But I think I think I really probably do have to come back to Settlers of Catan, because we played it so much, and then we got Cities and Knights expansion, and then played that so much. Like, I was so into that one. Like, we went really deep before I ended up going wide. And some of my friends I went really deep with on Settlers of Catan never actually followed me going wide on board games. Like, but I think that's kind of where I started.
Right. Okay. Well, for me, the first game was Settlers of Catan as well. Then we got Race for the Galaxy for our wedding, and then it took us exactly 1 year to read the rulebook, because I remember on our first anniversary we were like, we should probably learn how to play this game, right?
Yeah.
and yeah, so, and because it was such an impenetrable rulebook, and then after that we were like, oh yeah, games. And then I remember getting Arkham Horror, and that kind of was nifty. And then the game that I think really made me into a board gamer was Twilight Imperium 3. That's probably the 4th game I played.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, sorry, that's a lie. That's the 2nd game I played. I played Settlers of Catan, then I played Twilight Imperium 3. But then I got Arkham Horror, and then eventually I got Twilight Imperium 3, and I just got so obsessed about it. And I did this typical, like, really bad thing to do, where I tried to get in my friends who weren't quite playing board games into playing Twilight Imperium 3 with me. And I literally remember one person falling asleep 2/3 of the game in. Like, they literally went like, that's it, I'm done, I'm kipping, you know, you can continue playing this, but I am having a nap.
Yeah. I think falling in love with games and learning how to play them comes a long time before getting the social know-how to know when and what games to bring out with specific friends. That's for sure. I've definitely pushed poorly matched games on my friends in the past.
Second question.
This isn't really a question.
But it made me laugh. I might not get through this with a straight face. Is John Gets Games changing its name to John Gets Scams. As is written on the BGG page, or is the GAM thing a foray into new reviewing territory? If so, who's got quality GAMs in your opinion?
So apparently you don't know where the E is on your keyboard, Efka.
No, I don't, but GAMs is so funny.
I don't even know what GAMs are. What's a GAM?
Do you know what? I'm gonna take a second and type in GAMs into Google. It's a leg, especially a woman's.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
No, we're just gonna stick to cardboard.
Okie doke. Question 3. How does Elaine feel about Efka 2-timing her with another board gamer? Well, that's actually a pretty good question, because Elaine at first had absolutely no interest in doing a podcast. And then when she heard our first test run, not the first episode that we released, because we had a couple of test runs where we were still doing the podcast with John Perkins together. And she listened to that and she's like, darn it, I now really want to be a part of this. But but at the same time, there were like, there's so many timing restrictions with, again, Elaine has a full-time job. My full-time job right now is no pun included. And so I have a little bit more like leeway in terms of when I wake up and when I go to bed. And John lives in America, so she certainly wants to be a guest on the podcast. So that's how I can answer that question.
Cool, that'll be fun.
And she's planning to do so soon.
Awesome. Yeah, that'll be fun. We can ask her in person. I don't know. I mean, we haven't actually met. People might not know that, but like,
yes,
I've seen Efka on Skype for hours and hours. And Elaine, when Elaine went to bed, she said goodnight, John, to me. Like I have a relationship over the internet. I'm looking forward to meeting you guys at Gen Con, but I think at this point, you can't quite call it 2-timing just yet.
No, not quite. Yeah. We'll see how it develops at Gen Con, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you would like to make fun of Efka's poor typing skills in an email, feel free to send it over to us at lastplacepodcast@gmail.com. We will, I guess, answer emails on the show now at the end.
Yeah. Once again, if you have any concerns about having scissors at home, please do let us know. I know I keep pushing that line of conversation, but I'm really curious now about your scissor habits.
And one last thing is I've actually formally created the Last Place Podcast YouTube page. There's nothing on it yet. And something I forgot, apparently you need 100 subscribers before you actually get a name you could put in the URL, like youtube.com/lastplace. So if you're bored, you can search for Last Place Podcast, maybe subscribe. There's nothing on there yet, but in a couple episodes, we'll start hosting this podcast up on to that part of YouTube. So it's a little bit more of a specialized part, so it's easier for both of us to see. And you'll have the jump on it if you do.
And you can probably find the link for it in the description of this podcast.
I think you'll probably be able to do that. All right, Efka, well, that was fun.
I enjoyed talking about time travel,
worker placement,
and Rome. And let's just exit this podcast right now and say goodbye to our fellow listeners.
Bye.